School Board of Directors, Board of School Directors, starting at 6:37. First, one addition to our agenda, we need to appoint a chair for our evaluation committee. We can go to the first order of business, which is public comment. Hearing none, we can go to the second order of business, which is the consent agenda. Do you have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda approved. Now on to Hope and Eve for the learning focus.
All right, so starting off with student celebrations, all of these kind of meld together. It's hard to really categorize them, but our first student celebration is that the Conversation, which is a student-led group that talks about sexual assault and issues surrounding consent, and holds actual physical conversations about those issues during Solon Block once a month, and has done so for the past few years. Went into 9th grade classes recently and had community members and professionals present on consent and what that means, and it works in tandem with what they've learned in health and sort of builds on that so that they understand a really important issue.
So we had a slam poet, Stephen Willis, come in to the high school, and a lot of English classes went, and some people in free blocks, but he basically was this poet who talked a lot about race and issues of identity, and it inspired a lot of people to see how poetry and literature can inspire and how you can really showcase who you are through it. And I think it would be great to have more people come to the school and guest speakers to do more motivation for students to see the possibilities. And dual enrollment has been going really well. Their semester courses have an earlier end date than the schools here, so a lot of people have been excelling and taking advantage of that opportunity.
And Student Council has been tasked with helping the League of Women Voters register students to vote. So there's going to be a voter registration drive next week, and I'll be registering, and I'm excited. Student Council members will also be helping advertise that and make sure that students have what they need to bring in and have the information they need to register. Moving on to student concerns and needs. Just mentioning the continued efforts to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. I always just reiterate that with every presentation, even if there isn't something specific to bring up about that, just because I think it's so important. And Club Action has been working on something called peer tutoring, and they're having a Solon Block tomorrow to discuss and present to potential peer tutors who are interested. And so it would be students who are have taken courses that other students need help with, and basically helping build a sense of community and making sure that students can help and support each other if they're struggling in certain subjects, and just also get the gratification of helping other students succeed. And that ties into the achievement gap, of course, because if students aren't getting what they need out of their experiences in the classroom, then sometimes extra help is necessary, and I think that this is one of the ways to sort of ameliorate what might be, I wouldn't say lacking in the classroom, but what they might still be missing out on that would require that need of extra help. And in terms of student perspective, a lot of MHS students who are involved in Earth Group are also involved in Youth Lobby, which is a climate action group that has members from Harwood and G32 and has expanded to schools such as Essex and Burlington in the past. And so they're holding this big sort of first day in the legislature where they are going to be co-hosting Coffee with Constituents with David Zuckerman and hosting a press conference and delivering the United, I think it's called the Young Vermonters United Climate Declaration to various committees and also testifying in committee to certain legislators. And so that's just entirely around climate justice and ways to move forward in the legislative session this year.
Yeah, so this is our final marking period with summatives. So we have retake week approaching quick, and that's going to have midterms, and a lot of students are prepping for that. And I think it's just a good opportunity to take advantage of improving your grades and just working towards getting better academic scores. That's all.
Thank you. Question on voting. Can you, I should probably know this, but can you register prior to turning 18 if you're going to be 18 on election day?
Yes.
Yeah.
I heard the poet was amazing.
He was
I wasn't
so
here yesterday. I was
good.
at a workshop, so I missed it. But I heard he was just like knock it out of the park.
Yeah,
It was
everyone
wonderful.
loved him. It's like people who normally wouldn't be interested in that type of stuff were like really involved.
That's
with
exactly
that.
what I
Yeah,
heard, yeah.
it was great.
He was definitely really engaging. Yeah, and funny too.
He was
yeah,
funny, yeah.
personable.
My daughter went twice.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Sue Monamy even said that she thinks that she overworked him a little bit because his voice was like hoarse at the end of the day.
Excellent. On to board business. I think this is probably a good place to start with appointing a chair for evaluations committee. It was formerly Becky, but obviously since Becky has stepped off the board, we need a new chair, and Tina has graciously volunteered to do it. So I would suggest someone nominate Tina unless someone wants to fight her for it.
Go for it.
Actually, who do we have on that committee right now? Because Lisa had been on it before.
I think it's
Jerry's on it.
Jerry. I'm on
So
it.
Tina,
Jerry,
Jerry,
Tina.
and-
We met this week.
Yeah.
Thanks for the refresher.
I move we appoint Tina Muncy as the chair of the evaluation committee.
I
Second.
see.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. And then we need to appoint, talking about Becky, replacement. So Mara, if you want to come up and introduce yourself. You said excellent letter of interest, and you don't have to say much. You don't have to say much other than hi if you want
Should
to.
I use the mic, or
You
can I
can-
just talk
you can
here?
either-
Awesome.
Yeah, talk here, or you can sit if you want.
That
Oh,
little,
so-
Yeah, there's a
there's
mic
that
on
little
the
mic is
table.
the same.
Y'all are fancy. So my name's Mara Iverson. I use she, her pronouns. I live here in Montpelier. Otherwise, I could not, in fact, be a Montpelier rep on the school board. And I work for Outright Vermont, which is an LGBTQ youth organization, and we advocate throughout the state of Vermont. And I'm particularly interested in being on the school board here because I'm passionately interested about education far and wide. And it's kind of the place where kids spend all their waking hours between the ages of like 6 and 18. So that is a place for shaping the citizens that are going to support the country in the future. And that means that it's important for the people on the board to support those efforts. And I'm really excited about that.
Great. Excellent. Any questions for Mara?
How many committees do you want to be on?
And when can you start?
Yeah, Andrew.
Well, now, is that a serious question? Do you have, I was asked this question because I was appointed to a vacant seat, and I think it is, I mean, this is, Mara's the only applicant, correct?
Yes.
So we don't, it's not like we have, yeah, so it's not like we really have a decision. No, I'm very glad that you applied, so thank you so much.
Yes. If we,
Yeah.
I think if we
If-
did
if
have
we
a
could-
decision, you would be extremely competitive.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
without a doubt, yeah. Very, very glad that
But
you applied,
it's-
so thank you so much. Do you have, obviously there's going to be an election in like 2 months.
Mhm.
Do you have designs on, plans to run for election for the school board as well? So,
Mhm.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And I can.
I was going to do that anyway, and then an appointment came open before that, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and so just to explain this, because it's totally your choice, the appointment, which I'm gonna go out on a limb and say will probably occur, is good for the remainder of Becky's term, which is to town meeting day. And then there will be an election for, there's three of us.
It's actually not the
It's
remainder
not
of
the
her
remainder.
term. She has another year on her term.
Exactly, I was gonna say, so there's gonna be three full term seats, and then the remainder of Becky's term.
Three?
Yeah.
Three
Your
openings?
seat, me, and Tina.
Oh,
So
but
there's
you and
three.
Tina are
They're
are
competitive
rerunning.
elections, yeah,
Gotcha.
we're rerunning, but
Gotcha.
people can run against us if
Yes,
they want
yes,
to.
yes.
Because it's all one election.
Huh?
Isn't it? It's like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Just
it's,
vote for
saying
no
you
more
had
than
to-
three, right?
You had to
But-
designate?
but there
No,
will
no,
be-
because they have
Designate for the one.
terms, they have
But-
terms.
yeah, but then there will be an election for the remainder of Becky's term, which will be, I think, separately
Separate.
listed.
Yes.
But what we were discussing, practically wise, when you put your name on the ballot, are you saying, for
Yes.
example,
Yes.
if you're running for that
You
position,
are-
you
you-
have to designate,
In
right?
fact, your
Exactly.
petition has to
Say that, that's what I was
That's
trying
the
to
petition
say,
has to
yeah,
say
your
which one.
petition has to
Yeah.
say.
So your petition needs to indicate whether you're running for 1 year or for 3 years.
Yes, so,
Yeah.
that's where I was going. Michelle has indicated that, can I announce this? Yes.
I think we have, yes,
Yes,
but go for
so,
it.
so Michelle is, very sadly, but probably not so sadly for her, announced that she's not running, so there will be at least one non-competitive 3-year term, and then the remainder of Becky's seat. So, our appointment does not have, you can run for obviously any of those, so if you know, if you say, maybe I'll give it a year and see how I feel, you know, that, you know, then you can choose to run for Becky's seat, the remainder of the term we're gonna appoint you for. Or if you say, hey, I really don't wanna have to deal with another, I know I wanna be in this for 3 years, I don't wanna have to, you know, go and get signatures and deal with another election next fall, you know, you can run for the 3-year term, just so you're kinda clear on that. And-
Excellent information, thank you.
Yes, and I think you need 30 signatures. I'm actually checking with John Odom to see if there's been any change in the process, because we used to be part of the city and now we're our own district. I don't think there is, but I'm checking with John Odom to make sure.
And actually, the person to check with, is Tammy Legacy.
Okay.
It's the person who knows
Our-
us as
our
a
district.
district, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna find out the answer to that question, but the process in the past has been, you need to get 30 signatures by, I think,
I think it's 40
Jan-
days before town meeting.
yeah, so
Five
it's
days.
It'll be
usually
within
ends
the
up.
next 20 days,
Yeah.
before the end of January.
Exactly, before the end of January, it's usually late January,
Does
early
Sherry
February.
need to do that too?
27.
Yeah, I need
Yeah.
to get,
Yeah,
She needs.
I talked to Tammy.
okay.
Would you like
Yeah.
to vote?
I know the due date, Grant communicated with Tammy today, it's January 27th that these
Okay.
petitions will be due.
Okay, that's good to know, because I need to do that as well.
And any members of the public who are thinking about running, it's good for them to know as well. January 27th.
Yep.
Get your signatures lined up.
Would you like a motion, Jen?
I would like a motion, I think we're ready now to have further discussion.
I move that the board appoint Laura Iverson as a Montpelier representative to the school board.
I
To
second.
fill the term vacated by Becky Bauer.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. And, yeah, welcome to the board. You are totally welcome to, take a seat up here with us until you swear yourself in, which you can do either in person or over the phone with John Odom at City Hall. It's not official and you cannot vote, but we certainly are happy to have you sit for the rest of the meeting.
Do you wanna
and-
drag your chair over?
Yeah, I would drag my chair and get my board back.
Yes.
And
Great.
Anna will make
Thank
you a fancy name tag.
I think you can do it with any notary if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you can,
We'll swear in.
that's what
But-
John said.
But John, he's not gonna mess anything up.
If you can do it with any notary, we have several in the school district.
Yep, yeah, that's what John said.
All right, excellent. Well, welcome. It's exciting.
Bring this much.
Budget discussion, Grant.
Packed house for the
Yes, I know.
public forum.
Is that?
Packed house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
dealership
so,
up.
if it's all right with everybody, instead of going through every detail on every slide, since it's just us, I'll probably just hit the highlights of what's changed.
Mhm.
And then at the end, there'll be plenty of time for discussion. My apologies, I only got the briefing out this morning because I was told our equalized pupil number would be out Thursday afternoon or this morning. And unfortunately, it still hasn't come, so waited for nothing. But there were a lot of other things that changed, so there's really just one unanswered question. So unfortunately, all slides are loaded, so I'm going to be kind of skipping through. So here's the important one, changes since our last presentation. So the common level of appraisal came in pretty close in Montpelier. I was off by, I had estimated 86.86, or I'm sorry, 87.17, and the actual CLA came in at 86.86. That's pretty close, but it's still enough that it increased the tax rate by 0.6 cents in Montpelier, just that one change. In Roxbury, way off. Roxbury's CLA dropped over 5% last year. This year, it actually went up, so that was a shock to me. I guess that means property values did not increase in the community of Roxbury, which may not be a good thing for individual homeowners that are trying to sell, but it's great news for taxpayers because it dropped the tax rate 9.6 cents, just
Wow.
the CLA.
I think Roxbury is just such a small sample that it can swing.
Individual sales.
Yeah.
make a
Yeah,
big
it's
difference.
more
Yeah,
volatile.
probably.
than-
So before, Roxbury was almost a level tax rate. Now their tax rate's going down, I think like 9.4 cents, which you'll see later. On the expense side, tech center tuition went way up. The number, our 6-semester average went up dramatically because two semesters dropped off and 2 new semesters came on. The 2 that dropped were very low as far as student counts. The 2 that came on were very high. So we increased like, I think it was over 4 students in our 6-semester average. Not to mention, Central Vermont Career Center's tuition went up fairly dramatically as well. So that was a bit of an increase there. Health insurance corrections, if you remember, this is actually a correction to a correction because the last time I decreased health insurance looking at the statewide negotiations, but as I reread it, I think I was a little too quick to make that adjustment downward. So I undid that because of the timing where you can make adjustments to various bargaining units. So I put that back in, and then I think somebody changed from like 2-person to family or something like that. 504 placements, those are outside placements, not for kiddos that are on IEPs. I was able to reduce that. It's based on student needs. We know something more about student needs today than we did last month. Internet and phone, I dropped that $18,000. We are down to just 1 internet phone provider, and we have now worked it out so that our E-rate discount is being applied to our bills, and we have a better idea of what our monthly bills are going to be, and so that was a savings. On the revenue side, we got some numbers from the AOE. The special education block grant was a little bit lower than I anticipated. The special education EEE, which is essential early education for pre-K, that was a little higher than I anticipated. The special ed intensive, which is that like 56% or so of our expenses, that's a little higher than I had initially estimated, and our extraordinary is a little higher, probably because it went to 95% reimbursement from 90%, except it went from 50,000 to 60,000 to hit the threshold. But so the net was on the revenue side, we ended up positive. Tuition, that's just general ed tuition that we get for kids that are coming here from other districts or towns. I bumped that up a little bit in the hopes that you were going to approve the announced tuition, which you did. And so that is the changes for expenses and revenues and the tax factors. The one that we're missing, obviously, is equalized pupil stuff. District overview slide, this is mostly intended to put some, background information up for town meeting day. We went over the context, I don't need to go over that again. Multi-year plan, unknowns, we're down to, as soon as we get equalized pupils, I'll probably just delete this because there's no sense in just overly reminding people that dollar yield and non-residential rate have to be set by law, and everybody knows that. So as soon as we get equalized pupils, that slide will go away. Obviously, the numbers in this chart are different because the expenses went up a little bit, the non-tax revenues went down a little bit. So I think we were at, in ed spending, it's 4.68, I think we were at 4.77. So ed spending is down a little bit. Equalized pupils is still the big question mark. If you remember, I did bump it up by about 5 in my estimate here. I'm hoping that's still good. I'm hoping that's still maybe a little on the conservative side, but we should know that any day now. Enrollments, went over that last time, and staffing, went over that last time.
Quick question, Corinne, who's responsible for the equalized pupils? Is that Brad James or?
Brad James is the one who provides it, yeah. And I should be, in some fairness, our FY20 ADM didn't get certified with the AOE until this past weekend. So had he run the numbers on Friday, we wouldn't have a good number
Right.
either. So I was kind of telling him, wait, and then on Monday, hurry up and do it, hurry up and do it. So it should be, I'm hoping tomorrow, but definitely we should have it by next week, which is when you definitely need it in order to approve the budget. The expense detail, you can look at some of the words. I tried to update the narrative because some things changed, like career center tuition is a different number, so I changed some of those words. But really, the changes that are reflected in here are the ones I talked about that are the changes from December 18th, so I won't bother hitting the individuals. Nothing through the capital plan is different. Tax rates. So this one is different in a few places. So the revenues and expenses are updated. The equalized pupils isn't. I didn't change the dollar yield. As a reminder, that is different than what the tax commissioner had recommended, but it's still up in the air until the legislature finishes their work. The CLA in that box, that's what's been updated since last time, and you can see the blue box at the bottom, what I had estimated before versus what it is now, and the impact of that. So the impact of that different CLA was a 0.6 increase for Montpelier, 9.6 cent decrease for Roxbury. I should say for anybody from Roxbury that's listening, this is it. I mean, this is pretty much done. This 1.610 actual tax rate that we are estimating there, it's not gonna change. I could decrease the budget by $5 million. It can't go any lower because of statute. I could increase it by, I think the last time I played around with it, I could increase the budget by $850,000 and it still wouldn't change the Roxbury tax rate. So this 1.61 is pretty much done for Roxbury. For Montpelier, of course, that number could change dramatically if that equalized pupil number changes. And to give you some context for that, it's about 1 penny for every 7 equalized pupils. So if instead of $12.45, if that's $12.52, then that tax rate drops a penny. If I were to try to drop it a penny by doing something with the budget, I would have to reduce $120,000.
How much would you have to?
$120,000 is about a penny for Montpelier, and 7 equalized pupils is a penny. So yeah, and that's something you should kind of put in the back of your mind. If you have a target in your mind for a tax rate, once I tell you what's going on with equalized pupils, then you'll know what the impact is gonna be, and then you would know what you might want us to do financially to make up the difference.
So, Grant, if the pupil count comes in 7 higher than what you expected, then that gives a $120,000 buffer into the
That gives us one.
budget,
That would,
kind of
what it would allow us to do is,
reduce the tax
we
rate.
could increase our budget by $120,000 if this went up by 7 and the tax rate would stay the same.
Right,
Or we could leave the budget alone,
yeah,
this goes up by 7 and the tax rate drops
by a penny.
And then the residential tax rate impacts, I just refreshed those, it's kind of interesting how it's an increase of 9.4 cents in Montpelier, a decrease of 9.4 cents in Roxbury, which is just
Coincidentally.
how it works sometimes. And as this note says, Roxbury is a firm number. Even if our equalized pupils change, it's not gonna change Roxbury's tax rate. And the other thing to point out is these impacts are based on property value alone, and most people, at least I'd say 2/3 of the people, receive income sensitivity adjustments, which lower their impact. I updated this residential tax rate history as well. It still tells the same story. If you look at tax rates without CLA, tax rates have dropped for both communities from FY18 to FY21. In the case of Roxbury, it's even dropped fairly significantly when you factor in CLA. It's almost 9.4 cents lower. And the dark blue is Roxbury without CLA, the light blue is with CLA. And you can see last year, because the CLA dropped, that line went up, even though the without CLA went down. But this year, since the CLA was stable, or actually went up a little bit, both lines went down. For Montpelier, a minor increase without CLA, it turns into a big increase with CLA. And Andrew had asked for a 10-year history, which I couldn't really do for Roxbury, but I did give it to you for Montpelier. The one thing you should look at though is this number here for Montpelier with CLA. On the handout that you got for the 10-year history, that number might be a little different because I was tweaking as we went on. Non-residential, it is what it is. The budget has no impact to this. Outlook didn't change. Budget summary, I just kind of updated the numbers. It's a 4.68 increase in ed spending, 4.3 in spending per pupil right now. That number could change dramatically if our number of pupils goes up. And then the tax rates in Montpelier, right now, it shows a 5.7% increase, which is the 9.4 cents. Roxbury, 5.5 decrease, which is 9.4 cents. And we are really down to, I think we were all pretty comfortable with the budget before, so we're really just down to finding out that equalized pupil count. But if there's anything else, any other questions or changes, feel free. The upcoming meetings, we have one next Wednesday, which we have to approve the budget so we can get the warnings done.
Yep.
And then March 2nd is the informational hearing here at the high school.
Questions for Grant, Dina?
I had a community member ask what and maybe we really can't do it, what the cost per pupil was for us compared to the surrounding districts, and what's the comparisons to the surrounding districts and the rest of Vermont?
We're in the middle. I was looking at it yesterday. In terms of per pupil spending, where we were last year at least. They've just released that football. They've released the 2019 numbers at the end of.
And it depends a lot on what you're looking at too. I mean, you can't say anything about FY21 because everybody's building them right now.
Right.
I can tell you that we're at $17,060. The excess spending threshold is $18,756. So that's significant. We've got a nice cushion. We have plenty of room before we get penalized for tax rates. If you take that excess spending threshold and figure that maybe the statewide average is maybe 10% below that, then that would be like 16,880, which is slightly below our 17,060. But that's just me making a guess, because 21 we won't know until it's all done. In FY20, there's a couple of different ways you can look at it. You can look at pure statewide average, or you can look at it by small districts, medium districts, large districts. You can look at it by districts that are unified union school districts like us versus supervisory unions. I think if you looked at FY20 and you looked at unified union school districts, I would say the statewide average, I believe, was just over $16,000, and we were at $16,361. So that, I would say, is a firm number that you could point to, about $360 over the statewide average last year. And I would say, though, in general, Andrew's assessment is correct. We're probably in the middle of the pack, pretty close.
And there aren't a huge number of union districts, are there?
Yeah.
They're getting to be.
More and more.
That's true, that's true, yeah.
For FY19, if you look across the entire state, in terms of our rank of education spending per equalized pupil, and this was just published last month, we were 73.
Okay, thank you.
Meaning that 72 districts had higher per
Yeah.
pupil, and
Then we did, yeah.
and a similar number were lower, cause,
Districts,
yeah,
unions, however they're
Oh.
grouped together.
right, they're like 180 or 200 or something altogether.
There are. Let me see what the
That was
number
before
is.
some
Oh,
mergers.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's been a
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
hard to
mergers.
tell.
Maybe
That
not
was
high.
before mergers happened.
I'm looking for the lowest. There's some 160s on here. 162 might be the highest number.
So we're really
Mhm.
smack in the middle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's good to be average.
Sometimes.
165 it looks like in this grouping.
And of course, you have to also factor in how you look at averages
Yeah.
too. I mean, if somebody has an extremely high number, that could change the number if you're looking at a dollar value as opposed to where we rank,
This is just rank, yeah.
which is probably the better way to do it.
So probably the biggest change between what you're presenting us now and what we're gonna see next Wednesday is you will likely have the equalized pupil number.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, even as recently as like 1 o'clock, Brad emailed me and said he was still hoping to get it out today, but obviously
have it.
that, I mean, unless, I haven't felt the vibration on my phone, I haven't emailed it.
The
I would-
legislature is in session, that takes up his time.
And that's where he was all morning today, so, since he said that, I would assume it's definitely, a safe bet that we're gonna have it by next Wednesday.
Okay.
And hopefully in time for me to get out a briefing to you much before the meeting next time.
Cause what if we didn't, doesn't the law require that the ballot states the per pupil spending?
The ballot has to say, what the per pupil spending is and what the percentage increase is from the prior year.
So we wouldn't, if they don't get it to us.
We'd probably have to have an emergency board meeting.
Probably. I don't think it'll get there. I mean, right now, we have one technically, because what they did was they calculated it before
They did a
we got our
provisional.
FY20 numbers in. So they have a statutory number in there, which is 3.5% lower than last year. We don't wanna use that,
Right.
because
Nor
it's
is it
like,
accurate.
what's that?
We've got more kids.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've
we
got
got
more
more
kids
kids.
this year.
So, we'll have it. I'm confident we'll have it. The only thing I'm not comfortable with yet is I wanna see what it is too. I don't wanna just have them send it to us. I wanna see what it is. And it should be, if we were at 1240 last year and we had an increase again this year, 1245 really I think is conservative. It
Yeah.
should be at least that.
Yeah.
And if it's not that, then we're gonna have some issues that we have to sort through, and that makes me uncomfortable just because the statewide data system is so clunky that it could take a long time to get fixed. So hopefully we're in good shape though. I know, as a matter of fact, U32 got a look at our FY20 ADM because they asked me about a couple of kids. And so their kiddos finally showed up, which they had been hounding me about because their equalized pupils were low because we weren't counting their kids that are in our school. So I think we're good.
These are actual, not equalized, right?
Right, that's a head count on October 1st.
Right.
It's not even ADM.
So this looks like we got 15 new kids.
And then you have to look at what came off from the prior year.
Oh, no, wait, 72 to 108 is 36 new kids from last year to this year.
And now the big question is, then you take that and divide by 2 because it's a 2-year average, so that's 18, but then you don't know how the weighting is gonna factor that. But I would hope that we're in good shape.
Yeah.
Some kids are more kids than others.
Right.
We got a lot of 10th graders, it's a good thing. 10th graders are very weighted.
So with our current numbers though, what we're looking at giving to voters is a 5.7% increase in the budget with a 9.4 cent increase, and I feel like we're gonna have to really justify that to voters. I've told Jim I mentioned this to Bridget too, I'm really anxious because our municipality is struggling with health insurance costs, and I've been told by some city council members that they're looking at some steep increases on the municipal side, and I don't think it's fair, but I think that will affect us, and so I think that's something for us all to be cognizant of heading into this.
And I think that when we brief this budget, I think we should try to put it into terms of spending per pupil. Because really, it's just your total expense budget, that's not really fair, because there's districts out there that lost 100 kids and their budget's only going up 4%. Well, we gained a bunch of kids and our budget's going up 5%. That's apples and oranges. It should be, how are you looking per pupil? Because then their per pupil number is going way up higher and ours is staying pretty stable. And right now we're at 4.27. I'd still like that number to be around 4. So I'm hoping for an equalized pupil count that's a little higher, which will drop that percentage down. And I think that's the number we should be trying to tell people about and educate them.
I really think it will drop based on our actual.
Yeah.
The other story, and I think Libby was on this email, but I responded to Jim when we got these yesterday. I just took a quick look, and if you look at FY15 to FY21, although the change from FY20 to FY21, right now we're looking at it potentially being 5.4%, obviously subject to change. But say that stays. If you look at FY15 to FY21, the change over that period is closer to 10.5%. And if you look at total, and if you look at
In the tax rate or in ed spending?
in actually they're pretty similar, both the tax rate and per pupil spending, which makes sense because they're linked. But if you also look at inflation over that same period, you're looking at about a 10% increase to the overall cost of goods and services that people pay for every day. So when you contextualize the cost of our public schools going up at roughly the same percentage as the cost of most other things we're paying for over the same time period. And in fact, if we went back a year prior, the cost of our public schools in Montpelier would actually be less than inflation. I think it really helps.
Yeah. I think we have a few good stories to tell. I think one, start with this is a very solid budget, and it's based on the needs of our kids, and that it serves the needs of our kids, and there's nothing in here that's extravagant or not well thought out. And in fact, if anything, I think there could be an argument that we need more robust spending, and this is pretty constrained. Very responsibly so, but this is not, they didn't go all Cadillac on all things.
But if our taxes go up,
Well, you know, the taxes and other things do go up over time, but I think, you know, noting that, you know, as Andrew said, that overall in line, this is roughly been in the rate of inflation. We did have a few years where, you know, we had pretty light to no tax increases.
In fact, 18,
Tax
19 are reductions.
Reductions, yeah, and then 17 was very modest, and 16 was not particularly substantial either, and last year wasn't particularly substantial. These numbers may get better when we get the equalized pupil. And also, you know, the fact that Montpelier has a robust housing market, that, you know, led to a CLA that's, you know, that accounts for a lot of it too, so, we just need to tell that story and put the tax number in, well, one, hope it gets a little better, but then put it in context, cause I think it's a very solid budget, and I think it's a budget that Montpelier should support, but I do, you know, people pay attention to numbers and,
Yeah, I'm looking at inflation and these per pupil spending numbers, because I just crunched those numbers briefly yesterday, and from FY 15 to FY 21, they're pretty much exactly even. So, and that is with 2 years of projections based on the state's consensus revenue forecast for what
so
inflation's gonna be paired with what actual inflation was, so.
yeah, so I think we can tell a good story that, you know, the increase in the tax rate is not due to a year of spending that's out of line with what we've been spending.
And we heard from a lot of community members about desires and that they have for our schools that we're not providing for. I'm thinking of the theater group in particular.
Yeah, Bridget.
We've also, you know, Andrew's really helpful, Andrew and Grant, this story over a period of time, and I would just add to it that in these last few years, we have also been catching up on a lot of deferred maintenance. So we've not only
Yes.
been educating our students and meeting their needs as we've been fixing these buildings that had suffered for a long time, and that investment will continue to pay off for a long time.
We did pass a big bond, however.
Yeah, but that's,
But
that's included in the tax rate.
Yeah.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's going down over time from here on out, is it not?
All the construction bonds do go down a little bit each year as the interest goes down each year, and then of course you get the big drop whenever one gets paid off.
Right.
Yeah, they go down a little bit. Our retirement bond is kind of going up a little bit as that goes down though, so it's pretty stable. I'd say it's overall it's a little bit of a decrease, but not dramatic. So any thoughts or just hold tight and plug in the equalizer and get it to you, and we'll talk again next week?
Yeah, I think that sounds fair.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Grant, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
And thanks, Andrew, for additional auxiliary number crunching.
Yes, and thanks also Libby and Grant for getting some 10-year
Yes, thank you.
Well,
numbers in quick order, and I know you have other things to do, but I do think this is helpful in terms of telling a story, because this is the first time in 3 to 4 years, as Andrew pointed out, that we've brought a budget to the public that's really asked for much in terms of tax increase.
And I do like this slide a lot, if we can explain it, which maybe somebody else might be able to do better than me, but, I mean, this is Montpelier's line for tax rate without the CLA, which we can't do anything about the CLA, we have no control over that, and it's pretty flat.
Mhm.
Yes, it goes up, but that's whenever you factor in the CLA, which you can't do anything about, so. And this is for both communities as we existed as a unified district, so that's helpful. All right, thank you very much.
Great,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Grant.
Thanks for all you do.
So we are like well ahead of schedule,
Awesome.
which is good news for all. I think next we have executive session and contract negotiations. We also want to discuss
Personnel matter.
personnel matters, because I don't think administration contracts fall into Yeah, you're gonna give us an update on
Yep.
renewals on those too.
Do you need a special, ask to have Grant come into executive session or not? Cause I've asked him to come in.
We can
we
invite
can invite
anybody we
anybody.
want.
Yeah.
Alright, so we make a motion to enter and then we can invite anybody else.
Okay.
So we should invite Mara too.
That's his job.
He's read his Robert's rules.
Do what I can.
He and Robert are best friends.
I
First-
move to find that discussing contract negotiations in the public setting would put the district at a substantial disadvantage.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You have a motion to go into executive session to
For
discuss
the purpose of discussing contract negotiations.
and personal.
And personal.
No matter, with an invitation to business manager Grant Geisler.
And Mara,
Right, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.